Because, you know, we, as you've heard earlier, we, in a way, cannot fight the issue of violence against women and girls and children and poverty unless we actually took to task our perpetrators. And our main perpetrators in the Philippines are our Philippine government, but also the US government. Because we're totally a puppet government, we're totally controlled by the US, and we're totally exploited by all the foreign policies of the United States. So I was given the incredible honor on the second year of 1 Billion Rising to be the global director, because in many ways it was really, 1 Billion Rising emerged to really also be a global solidarity movement. All of a sudden, our issues became exposed to each other. We saw connections with each other's issues. We saw where we could ally, we could build mass-based movements, and we could articulate and verbalize and expose all the issues that were happening in our country. So if you saw some of the footage and also like this leaflet, the death of Jennifer Laude last year was at the forefront of our 1 Billion Rising Revolution campaign in the Philippines. Because to us, we cannot separate the military occupation that's going on in the Philippines by the US troops, and also our subservience to the US, and also the continued use of militarization that are using our women, girls, our trans communities as sex toys, sex objects. You know, the ship you saw in that film, the USS Pellew, there was 5,000 Marines on that ship, and Pemberton was one of them. And they actually come to the Philippines, let's say for 3 weeks. 2 weeks, they do supposedly training exercises, but the real truth of that is this. It's in the guise of training our Philippine military, but in reality, it's there to politically suppress our activist leaders as well. So I cannot tell you how many members of GABRIELA, of Bayan, of all our other mass-based progressive Philippine activist groups who are disappearing, who are taken, tortured, we don't know where they are. So in many ways, the presence of the US military is to also control and suppress our various levels of activism, so that if you're an emerging activist, what they hope is that you will get scared because all this military might come after you and you might yourself disappear, so that you will no longer then fight for social justice issues. So there are many, many layers as to why the US is there. But really, after the 2 weeks of supposed training exercises, they have a week off in a city like Olongapo, which is where Jennifer Laude was living, for R&R. What is R&R? Rest and recreation. And what does R&R mean in the military parlance? It's girls, women, sex. So somewhere like Olongapo City and Angeles City, which are 2 cities in the Philippines, are literally brothel cities. The entire city is a brothel. So when the tragedy happened to Jennifer Laude a year ago, of course all of us members of GABRIELA were there. We were picketing on the first day of the hearing where Pemberton was a no-show. We were out there, we wanted to make sure our presence was felt. It was also a very complicated scenario because the local people in the city themselves were saying, we know you're GABRIELAs and you're very radical and militant and you're fighting for justice for Jennifer, but please don't scare the Americans away because we need the work, because we're hungry. So do you see the many layers of need and exploitation that accompanies these kinds of militarization scenarios? And also, what happened on that day of that first hearing is that our own government authorized our own Philippine military and police to attack us, the activists. And they were there to protect the Americans. So it's really crazy. It's like a crazy scenario of like, this is our country, it is a fellow Filipina who got murdered, and you are the Philippine military and police and our Philippine president, and you are still there under the VFA and EDCA, those 2 agreements, protecting the interests of the US. So it's a very multi-layered scenario, and almost one that I would say half our nation is still subservient to because they've known no other way, and also because they are so economically deprived that they feel that maybe without U.S. Involvement in our country, that we would be worse off. Because we've never known what it's like to be a truly sovereign nation. And to go back to Jennifer Laude's case, what did we hear in the news in the Philippines? He didn't just strangle her. The real truth of that, he strangled her and shoved her head into the toilet. He drowned her too. And he bit her ear. I mean, what kind of violence is that? Is that really trans panic? Come on, that's really bullshit. I mean, that's bullshit as it is, as a reason to kill her. But when we also went to the brothels around the area to investigate with our GABRIELA sisters, a lot of the women there, the sex workers, were saying, the US Marines know who are the trans sex workers and who are not. So he definitely went to her because he knew she was trans. So how can he invoke now in the court, in a dummy court in the Philippines, that he did it out of trans panic? And because sadly in the Philippines it's still not as progressed as what you have here in terms of knowledge of gender and trans, and so there's so much discriminatory, like the media, the reporting from the media. Just that alone was really almost, it was so enraging to even see in our local media, and these were like legitimate broadsheet press, saying, well, that's what you get when you lie about your gender. That's what you get when you deceive someone. How can it be that the culpability and the accountability fell on Jennifer Laude, who was killed? Do you know what I mean? It's so insane where the debate went, and it's still ongoing in the Philippines. And then, so part of our battle as activists is, of course, we are fighting for justice, but also the radical shifting in consciousness of people in terms of gender and trans rights, and what is on top of that in terms of the Jennifer Laude case, which is also the international policies that are perpetuating the violence. Because in many ways, what we also heard from the Jennifer Laude case is that everything happened in 30 minutes. Okay, just imagine this. Let's just imagine this. He was in a bar, he picks her up. He cannot give us the bullshit reason that he didn't know she was a trans person, trans woman. They go to the motel, there's CCTV cameras. From the moment of checking in to the moment of him coming out of the door, and he left the door open. I mean, who does that? He killed her, he left the motel room door open, 30 minutes. I mean, what does that say? If I was an investigator, I would say he really had it in for her. Wouldn't you think? Wouldn't you think? I mean, 30 minutes, how can that all happen so fast? And to have the arrogance and the hubris to just walk out of that motel and basically leave the door open. Because he knew there was a treaty that was protecting him, the VFA and the EDCA. He had a mighty, mighty government that was going to be on his side, and of course continues to be on his side, and that he would be protected at all costs because he belongs to the most powerful, nation in the world. And so our battle has been to really not just jump those two treaties, but to also see how, where are we now lying as a human race in terms of our giving of dignity and respect and integrity to all peoples of the world, So 1 Billion Rising in many ways has evolved into a much bigger movement than just ending violence against women and girls. It really is ending violence. Because how can we say that issue is ours and that issue is not ours? No, when our sister like Jennifer Laude gets killed, that is all our issue. That is all our issue. When our indigenous leaders are getting killed, that is all our issue. We all belong to the same human race, and we all have to do everything in our power to ensure that everyone can live with the same privilege we all do. We can live with freedom, with dignity, with respect. I mean, not everyone, but still, when we have more than others, the more we have to lay our own lives in order to serve those who are truly on the margins and on the brinks of our society, often very invisible, often not really protected by any laws or not even given any importance by the media. So I just like to say, it's been such an honor to be with all of you today because I think there is so, on the one hand, it feels, I'm 45 years old, and I'm older than all of you here. And many of my mentors in the movement, in the women's movement, I can see how exhausted they are. You know, they were exhausted. They've been fighting for reproductive health rights, passing the divorce bills, anti-rape bills. And then I see my generation kind of now really moving forward with the advocacies. But then, on the one hand, you kind of think, God, it's getting worse. Like, you know, the world, what's happening to the world? The forms of violence are getting far worse. But then I see young people like all of you, and I think, no, there's so much hope. There's so much hope, because the young people are now really demanding a future with dignity and humanity, and they're really demanding that they determine what that future is. And within the 1 billion rising world, our most amazing risings were truly led by the youth, young people, who really were defying, they were rebelling, they were radicalizing communities, and they were fearless, and they were really using art and activism and all their talents and all their skills in order to change the societies that they're living in now. So I'd just like to thank all of you for being here today, for coming here to commemorate the 1 year of Jennifer Laude, but also to really come together to learn more, understand more, be in solidarity, because this long struggle to end violence against all our peoples is not an easy task. It's not an easy task. We are stronger in larger numbers. We have collective energy and power. We have power in our communities. The power is really in our hands. But we need to rise up and stand together, and we need to be in total alliance and solidarity with each other. I'll give you an example. In the